sold on eBay.
So that was Fox News. One of the interesting things was I don't think they had any idea how to put makeup on an Indian person. they put like 10 pounds of makeup on my face and my teeth were glowing. So anyway, that was Fox News. That was cool because they're usually not very sympathetic to atheists, but they like that story and that was very positive. A couple other Christian magazines picked up on it too. This one in particular made it seem in this little blurb like I converted by the end of it. So some of it was out of my control, but a couple of them, this is a journal for Christian pastors. They did a wonderful story where they really focused on the criticisms I had and how pastors should or could make it better. So some of them were really good. Now, one of the really cool things is when all this happened, Jim Henderson, the guy who won me, he had written a book about how to be a Christian, how to be an evangelical Christian without being scary about it. He had written this for a Christian book publisher, and it sold decently well. And when the Wall Street Journal article came out, they mentioned his book, and it sold a lot of copies as a result. So, you know, the book publishers were like, oh, they keep tabs on their authors. And they were like, this is a really interesting auction. And then they were reading what I was writing on Jim's website, and they were thinking, how is it that an atheist could write negative things about church without the whole world being mad at him? And they were intrigued by that. So, you know, we talked, and basically they said, we're really interested in this. Why don't we send you to more churches, not just in Chicago, but around the country? We'll send you to more churches once you're all done with your obligation to Jim. And so what that ended up resulting in is this book, I Sold My Soul on eBay. And they picked the title, not me. I was like, I didn't sell my soul on eBay. And they're like, but it's sketchy. And if you flip the book over, it'll say what you really did. I'm like, all right. And I like the title now. And if this ever gets made into a movie, I will be played by Kirk Cameron. It sold decently well in the past year since it came out. Not as well as this book. What? I love that picture. But the book is sold really well. The amazing thing is, this was one of the first times a Christian book publisher has put out a book by an atheist. This was not normal. And it actually, they marketed it only to Christian book publishers because they weren't sure how it would play to the general public. So if you go to Barnes & Noble, it's in the Christian living section of the bookstore. But it's sold pretty well to Christian audiences. And as a result of this, I ended up starting a website called friendlyatheist.com, where hopefully this dialogue about atheism, Christianity can kind of continue in a way where it's interesting for me to write about things happening in the atheist world, but without being as kind of imposing as other atheist bloggers. And by the way, you know you made it big when even your high school, friendlyatheist.com, you know you made it big when even your high school newspaper speaks well of you? Stanford graduate sells his soul on eBay. All right. So anyway, the question is, how come this story got attention? How come people were interested in all of this when a lot of atheist organizations, a lot of atheist individuals have done so many really interesting projects, and they get vilified for it, and people say they're evil and mean and wrong? How come this worked, and how can we kind of redo that, replicate it in other areas? And kind of we have this horrible image right now where we're evil, and what we got to do is, you know, show this side, the happy side, the friendly side of atheism. Because when that bottom version of atheism gets shown, the beliefs and the philosophy behind atheism stays the same, but it's more palatable for other people who are listening to it. Because when you tell them you don't believe in God, or you do believe in God, you're a moron, they don't really listen to that. But when you say it in a way, and you frame it in a way that they can understand, and they can at least respect, it's a little easier to talk to them. One brief example, if you look at American news, and I don't know if you get these shows here too, but if you look at American news, for the past few years, the biggest news show in prime time is run by this guy, Bill O'Reilly, who was really popular at first because he was new, he was fresh on the scene, and he was giving an analysis of the news with his conservative opinions, but he was a jerk about it. And people kind of like that because they're not used to seeing that. Well, what's happened in the news over the past couple of years is there was a new guy who opposed him in the same time slot on another network. And he gives a liberal point of view. But the thing about him is you could argue that the other person is just as fundamental about his beliefs, but he does it. If you watch their newscast, Bill O'Reilly always pissed off, always angry, always yelling at his guests. The other guy is always smiling, always joking, and always acting like he's giving you both sides. Sometimes he does, you could argue, sometimes he doesn't. But the other guy, Keith Olbermann, is always smiling. And the amazing thing is, in the past couple weeks, this guy's newscast has actually gotten higher ratings than Bill O'Reilly's, and that trend is going up. The point being that this might be fun and interesting the first time you see it, but over time, this is the one that's going to win out. And I think that's kind of the style we need to emulate. What I want to do is share a couple stories. We need to shed the image that says atheists are evil. We need to get rid of this image. And I want to share with you just a few stories, like some things I've seen atheists do that have just not worked at all, because they tried to they think if you yell at people and tell them they're morons, that they're going to believe you and come to your side. It's not going to work. And some ideas that have actually worked. A couple things that sound good at first but didn't work. This happened in 2002. It's called the Godless Americans March on Washington. This was an atheist idea. What if we all go to Washington, D.C., kind of like a million-man march sort of thing. We'll all show up on the Mall of Washington. We'll show that, look, we exist, and we exist in big numbers, and you have to listen to us, Congress people, because, you know, we're an important constituency. And what do they call this amazing day of positivity? The Godless Americans March. What do you think every single person who saw this sign who was religious felt? They felt like it was a slap in the face. Oh, you're godless. Like, it's like you're saying, if you believe in God, you know, forget you. They were offended by this, and believe it or not, this did not get a lot of press, despite the fact it was actually a pretty cool event, and they had amazing speakers, and they had a lot of people show up. In fact, how many of you have heard the word bright? Like a person who doesn't believe in super